Hello everyone, welcome back to the Brain Food blog. I'm Dr. Drew Ramsey, and every Thursday here on Medscape, we have a conversation about you, about mental health, about things that we can do to improve our brain health. And so I wanted to have a special conversation today with a really fun and interesting woman who is interested in psychology and mental health and spirituality. And so Brittney Moses is going to be joining us. And here she is. Hi there.
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
Good. So great to be on and to see your face and to be having this conversation.
I know we're meeting for the first time. Your head's getting cut off a little bit. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Let me back up then. Is that good?
That's great. That's great. Hi. So it's nice to meet you, and thank you so much for coming on. And everybody who's sending hearts and waves from around the world, thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to talk about mental health and spirituality. And the reason I wanted to talk about that is I think it's something that is such an important part of people's lives and an important part of people's mental health. And so, Brittney, just to start out, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? You're tuning in from California. You're at UCLA. You're doing lots of interesting work. You've got a YouTube channel. So tell everyone a little bit about you.
Well, hi. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, I'm in California in the Los Angeles area. So it's a beautiful sunny day out. We're in the middle of summer. Wish you guys could be here to enjoy the sun, but nevertheless, I'm studying psychology at UCLA, and I research assist at UCLA Seminole Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. And so that's been super fun. I like to talk a lot about the intersectionality of faith and mental health. As you can imagine, a lot of times people will turn to their faith community or their house of worship when they're in psychological distress. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows for over 20 years that when a person's in psychological distress, they'll turn to their church or their clergy before they ever step foot to a mental health professional. And in a way that's understandable, it's very familial. In a lot of ways, it can maybe be easier to navigate than the mental health care system. So I think for me, I'm really passionate about bridging that conversation so that there is holistic healing, but also meeting people where they are from your worldview, because cultural competence is very important to healing and recovery as well. So yeah, I do YouTube videos. I have a podcast having conversations with both mental health professionals and those with lived experience about the faith, culture, and mental health conversation. So it's been awesome. I'm enjoying every step of it.
Well, it feels like a piece of, excuse me, also that in mental health we miss, that if you're working with somebody and a lot of the folks tuning in are healthcare providers, if you have faith, it's something that you mention, maybe you say a prayer together. If you don't have a religious background, it's something that doesn't feel like it's part of your job and maybe gets avoided or not even asked about. I remember, I'm not really from much of a faith background, but when I work with patients, I've learned so much in terms of, what gives them strength. And it's also surprising. It's almost like if you don't take as part of your history. I mean, it's one of the first things I ask is, is there a kind of religious or ethical kind of set of values you ascribe to I should know about as your care provider? And so it's such an important part.
Oh,
Instagram time limit. Sorry, that's embarrassing. I wanted to hear some of your thoughts about how healthcare providers it can, I don't want to say take advantage of, but I'm really concerned about the mental health and the burnout that happens in healthcare. And it feels like one thing that kind of a church community or faith community gives people is a structure around which how to take care of the spiritual self. And I'm just wondering some of your kind of guidance from that for people as they're either wanting to deepen their kind of notion of spirituality in their life, or if they don't have it and they want to start experiencing it. Like how do people in healthcare do that?
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I feel like, so I mostly come from a church background, so I'll just be honest in saying that's kind of where my strength is, but I'm sure that this can be universally relatable when it comes to a faith community. Like you're saying, I think it's important to see, I think mental health in general is having a bunch of tools in a tool belt, right? So it's a system of support. Like you may have your psychiatrist or your therapist who is helping you work with the cognitive side, or even the nutritional side, which is very important. And then you have your faith community, which is very familial. That's where you get that social support, which is so important for healthy attachments and healthy bonding. I always talk about how, you know, we literally have neurochemicals like dopamine and oxytocin that are released upon intimacy and that are wired for us to have healthy attachments for one another. And so that social aspect, that social support is definitely a huge tool in the tool belt of taking care of our mental health, people that you're doing life with, right? Because the truth is that you know, maybe your psychiatrist or your therapist, they're not in your everyday life, right? They're not in your everyday world. But those who you're walking with in your faith community can hold you accountable and check in with you and say, you know, how are you really doing? You know, and for me, it's really interesting because historically speaking, the church kind of was always this place of care, like around 400 AD, before there was institutionalized healthcare. The monasteries were converted into places of care for those who were feeling afflicted, both mentally and physically, and for travelers passing by. So there's always been this foundation of community support there that can maybe extend an office in a way. And so I think having all of that together, where we are approaching the biological, the psychological, the social, the spiritual, is really going to optimize our recovery and our healing for sure. Yeah.
I was curious, you talked about the you're at this intersection of the mental health community and the faith communities. And I was wondering, what are some of the common misperceptions that you see people on both sides have?
Yes, that's a really great question. So there do tend to be two camps, right? There is the scientific camp, right, which is primarily based on the research and what's evidence-based, and that is definitely useful, as we want to be doing and wise things that provide actual outcomes. I'm like, let me step back so I don't cut my head out. And that's great, right? But like you were saying, there may be a lack of that cultural understanding, such as someone who is of faith and what their worldview may be and how that is giving them strength and how they are connecting to those relationships around them through their faith, right? So we might be missing that aspect, right? But then there's also, they can be the 100% spiritual view that says, oh, it's just a spiritual matter. You know, it might not take into account the biological aspects that contribute to our mental health, or some of the evidence-based therapeutic practices that have shown to help relieve maybe depression or anxiety in people's lives. And so it can get very black and white, you know? And so for me, I think it's really important to integrate the two together, to say, okay, the two can coexist, right? That we can move through faith. Faith is hope in essence, right? In scripture, it says that hope is the confidence of things that, you know, we haven't seen. We're hoping that even though things look the way they are right now, that this isn't it. And so it's important to have that hope as a foundation, especially when you're going through really such daunting trials where you can feel stuck, but also have
why for healthcare providers, it's also such an important, you know, we have this, the kind of black and white of the dichotomy you're speaking about.
Yeah.
You know, in medicine in some ways, and in healthcare, right, our hope is in therapeutics and in science and in data. And we can, in some ways, part of burnout, lose hope, especially when those things aren't working for us, or when you know, we're not getting good outcomes. And so I think that you have to have a sense of hopefulness to be in healthcare in some way, but we don't, you know, in some ways we don't get a lot of exposure to or training about faith. So, you know, there's always in the hospital, but there's not a lot of, I think, education or orientation around like that's an important aspect, let's say as a physician or as a nurse or as a social worker, that, you should also work on your spiritual health, whatever that means to you. Maybe you're agnostic, maybe you have fallen away from the church, right? But that it's something just part of your wellness game plan and part of being in some ways the best professional you can be that you have to kind of work on.
Yeah, it really is that grounding. And it's really encouraging to hear you say that, because I feel like there really are these two sides where it's like maybe the mental health care field really does need to meet the faith community more where they are, understanding that a lot of these faith communities are on the front lines of the mental health crisis, because this is where people turn to when they're in distress.
I suspect the clergy of America deliver more mental health services
than
mental health professionals. I mean,
yes.
I think you're entirely right. That really is the front line. One of my supervisors at Columbia became kind of one of the main psychiatrists of the Hasidic community. And in part because he had a good relationship with a few rabbis, and they knew like this, you need that moment, like this is, and because it had come in that way, the families weren't left kind of looking for an expert. People got care very quickly when they needed it. And so I do think there's a tremendous amount of mental health kind of outreach and care that hopefully in that integration you're talking about will go both ways. It's funny because, well, not funny, but Lifeway did kind of this survey, this study of about, I think, 1,000 Protestant pastors, and just seeing like what was going on with their churches and mental health. And what they found was that 59% of pastors had counseled someone who went on to further receive a diagnosis, a mental diagnosis. And that's 59%. That's over half. And that's just those who have been surveyed. So we know that that's where they are. And I think we can just having more conversations about how we can bridge it together. Whether that means, if you are a leader of a faith community and you have, a trusted mental health professional come in and talk to your leadership about mental health first aid, just the basic symptoms of what you can pick up when someone's in distress or might need a little bit more care as a reference. And then on the flip side, just building those relationships with the mental health community as well. And I think there are a lot of people who are in the field who are sitting right there in your congregations and clergies and can also give insight that's underestimated. And the more that we have these conversations, I think the more we can step out and actually take action toward bridging that gap. Everyone who's tuning in, I'm Dr. Drew Ramsey. I'm with Brittany Moses, who's a researcher and studying psychology at UCLA, and she's really interested in the intersection of spirituality and mental health. She's got a great YouTube channel, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We have people all over the world here: Bali, Iran, all different faiths, all different backgrounds. And so I want to ask a real just human question of you in terms of being a spiritual person, that if there are things that if everybody was watching was going to do a couple things to deepen their spiritual practice in the next couple of weeks, I'm wondering what you might advise in a say like non-denominational way, but you're welcome to use your own practice as an example. But what would that be, and then what do you think it would do for us? And I don't mean to sound that skeptically. I want it, but I want to ask in that skeptical doctor, what will be the outcome?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think actually a lot of things are universally good for our health. And for example, I think the one thing that's very practical, that's just that simple thing you can do every day, is starting your days from a place of intention rather than reaction. And I really wanted to highlight that because of everything that's going on today with the news and with COVID-19 and seeing all these deaths and these social justice issues that are going on. Tensions are high. We know that too much bad news can kind of undermine our mental health. And if you're waking up and you're, flipping on your phone and the first thing you're doing is like looking at your demands and emails and you're looking at all the news, you've already let the rest of the world plant seeds in your mind, right? Of anxiety, of fear, of negativity, of frustration. And you're coming into your day now from a premeditated state. of those emotions. So I think one thing we can all do is decide to go into the day from intention, right? So we're creating space, maybe in the first hour of the day. Maybe that is through prayer, and just reconnecting with God, or in meditation, mindfulness, and just grounding ourselves, and then setting an intention of how our day is going to go out, saying, this is how I'm going to use social media today. This is how I choose to respond. Should things come up that trigger me, going in with your own preset boundaries, I think is going to be really, really helpful just for your mind and your soul. The other practical thing I would say is genuine connection, right? Just connecting with people. I think the general consensus in the mental health field, we're saying social distance doesn't mean social isolation, and just the importance of being in community. So I know a lot of faith communities are having services online. So even getting into that regular routine of, having something that you are showing up for weekly that is going to refill your cup, that's going to refill your mind and soul, and you're going to be connected with your community, I think is a really big deal as well, whether it's through FaceTime or things like that.
It is an easy time to go and experience different faith communities. I also found, as somebody who wasn't raised in the church, the few times in my life where I have had a regular church practice, when we were in New York for a while, I'd go to the First Presbyterian Church, which is downtown. Mm-hmm. And, and there is something about that, no matter what your beliefs are or what your religion is, you walk into a holy place like that, a place, it really by design, asking us around our kind of inward journey, asking us to kind of, in some ways sit and forgive ourselves for whatever we've struggled with or done poorly, and then to have that hopefulness and that kind of resilience and strength to move forward in our lives with more intention. It is such a powerful practice, and something it's amazing, especially in healthcare, which is by and large a field by which, people have a lot of intention. How I think it's at a core of burnout, where we really get steered away from that. And because, especially if you don't have a faith, you don't have that specific structure, right? That every Sunday, every Wednesday, my mother-in-law had, a Bible study where it was a group of women she knew for, 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
And so I really, I do appreciate that. And then genuine connection, that's hard for a lot of people who are feeling isolated. Do you have any tips on, especially when you're in that spot, like, not feeling real genuinely connected? Like, what do you do to kind of foster more of that?
It's funny because it is very paradoxical, where it's like the very thing that you need is the very thing that you're resisting. You need to connect, but you're stuck in this mode of isolation and you just kind of want to stay there. But I think that taking care of our health, including our mental health and spiritual health in general, there is this aspect of you at some point take a step past what you're feeling to get out of that, outside of what maybe feels natural to you, to do what will benefit you maybe in 24 hours or a week or a year. So getting used to stepping outside of what you feel to do what will ultimately feel better in the end. Same thing with working out. But
it's a great point. I think we often miss what we kind of forget that our feelings often are a result of the actions that we take. And so we're in that bad state. We think, I'm in a depressed, bad, anxious, grumpy, not genuine feeling mood. Yeah. And we're kind of looking for the reasoning around that as a way to get out of it. Oh, if I understand it, this is why I feel bad. And that helps. I'm a psychiatrist. I like understanding things. But, often what gets people out of that is action, that the mood follows the action. And it's such it's such an easiest thing. In some ways, everybody watching knows that, right? You treat yourself better, you feel better. But just as a reminder, because I do think it's something we all can fall out of the habit of.
I think there are two very practical ways to do that is, scheduling a time, maybe to FaceTime a friend. Something that my friends love using is an app called House Party, where there are little games that you can play through the through the FaceTiming app. And you set up a time, hey, next week or at this time, let's call each other. And then by the time you get there, it's like, well, you've already set a date. I mean, you could cancel, but you've scheduled something that is going to require you to show up, which is probably what you need, even though you don't feel like it. or two, having a friend who holds you accountable. There was a season of my life where I was struggling with anxiety very deeply, and I wanted to stay in my hole, but I knew that I needed to step out and connect and either make that therapy appointment or go to that support group. And I had a friend of mine literally put the appointment in her calendar, and for her to, at that time say, hey, how was it? Did you go? What happened? And that was really encouraging, that accountability. So those might be a couple practical ways to step past what you feel in doing what might be better for you.
That's helpful. Thank you for that. And I'm curious in terms of how you feel like quarantine and the pandemic is affecting people that you know, or people around kind of spirituality. Do you find a lot more people are getting interested in, kind of asking and curious? Is it having people who have faith? Is it, causing a kind of struggle? Like, why is this happening? What
Yeah, I think that anytime there's like suffering coexisting with faith, there can sometimes be a dissonance with how people are coping with that. But I think actually on a more beneficial side, what this is doing is it's creating a pause for people to actually check in with themselves. And I want to say to no longer solely define themselves by their productivity, by their doing, by their achieving, because a lot of us had to adjust and put a pause on things or step back on things that we're used to and really check in with ourselves in a way that we may not habitually do because we're always on the go. I know I am. I'm actually speaking very personally as well. And so I think that it has caused people to lean in deeper to their faith and to themselves and their convictions, and say, okay, maybe the way I was doing my life before this wasn't the healthiest, and refining that. And I think that's been the healthy side of things, is it's caused us to lean in more to our internal life.
Yeah, I've been calling it sort of inner journey, and
Yeah.
I felt like an annoying psychiatrist in the beginning, where it's like, this is gonna have some upsides for you, like you're gonna go in deep to some place.
Yeah.
But I think that it's true, and also I really appreciate what you said about how we get a perspective then on our lives, and how in some ways we as you mentioned, genuine connection is so important. Well, that's something that often in our lives we're missing, and it's close to us, but we don't put the intention in to create it. And so I think that's just a really important kind of aspect of, I don't know, I feel a little tension in this, part of me really is desperately missing the way the world was.
Right.
And part of me also feels there's this dissonance now, though, if we acknowledge kind of what you said, that gosh, we are all kind of busy, and we are all in a very consumptive mode.
Yeah.
And we never imagined that we'd ever cook dinner this much at home. And gosh, we have, and we're all probably healthier for it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, right.
So there's some way that then we end up in this spot of, I really miss this thing, but I'm an acknowledgement that it maybe wasn't the healthiest, especially on a kind of spiritual and health level. And so it gets me excited. Maybe we're creating something new.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
I hope everybody watching, this does lead to some good transformation and changes for you. I wanted to bring Brittany Moses on. Everybody who's tuned in, this is Brittany Moses. She's interested in the intersection of mental health and spirituality. And as I've been here, quarantined on my farm in Indiana, thinking a lot about nature and life and God and, I don't know, mental health, I wanted to have Brittany join us to have a conversation around that, and around some thoughts of how that's important to us as healthcare providers, not in a denominational way, but in a aspect of you as a healer, you as a provider, that probably needs to be worked on, in the sense of helping you have a resilience and a strength and a stance with your patients, and also an understanding of your patients. I feel like so often in the United States, spirituality gets framed as, there are people, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses, that don't take blood products. Make sure and ask about that, and don't give them blood products. And it's, it isn't in some ways the approach that would be optimal in terms of us maybe understanding more about our patients and these aspects of our lives. Brittany, for everybody watching who wants to follow up with you, what's the best way to kind of learn more about you and your YouTube channel, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm right here on Instagram. I always love new friends and continuing to have this conversation. I also have my website, BrittanyMoses.com, and that kind of houses everything, the blog, the videos, and all that good stuff. I actually just released a 21-day mental wellness challenge, which is just doing one thing every day, one simple thing, because we got a lot going on, that's going to help improve our mental health, nutrition as well. And so that's going on, and I'm on YouTube, and I just started releasing more videos about overcoming negative thoughts. And actually I'm talking about the sometimes the gray area of medication in faith. Like, is it a sin? Does it mean you're not having enough faith? Like, I love talking about that stuff. And the biology of why it's necessary, and how our faith also comes into play, is there are many natural tools that can be used for our overall healing. So if that's something that's interesting to you, then come on over, and I'm always happy to make new friends.
Brittany, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed your content. It's allowed me to think more deeply about my own spirituality and how I approach that in practice. And I'm just so grateful for your work and expanding the conversation, which I just think is our best way to fight stigma and providing tools. Everybody check out, who doesn't need 21 days of more wellness? That sounds like a wonderful tool. And so everyone check that out. And I look forward to interacting with you more. And everyone, I'm Drew Ramsey, MD. This is the Brain Food Blog. If there are subjects, guests, things you want me to get into, you can either send me a direct message or let Medscape know. Probably the easiest way, just let me know over on Drew Ramsey, MD. That's my Instagram. And I appreciate your attention, your audience, all the comments, all the hearts, all the checking in from around the world. It's just such a treat to get to share some time with you every week thinking about your mental health. And I hope you'll take care of it. I hope you'll add a little spiritual component to this week. And, just like one of my patients, I'll see you all next week, Thursday at 4. And take care until then. Brittany, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been great.